I think we're all familiar with the parable of the vineyard in the Bible. It's a parable about a group of workers who comes to a man in his vineyard, the landowner, who's now their boss, and he hires them, and they agree at the beginning of the day they'll get 1 denarius for their entire workday. Well, the landowner realizes that there's a ton of work that needs to be done in his vineyard. So he goes out to the markets and he asks another group of people to come work in the vineyard. And then later he asks another group. And at the very end of the day, he asks one more group to come and work in his vineyard. So at the very end of the workday, they all come to collect their wages. Now, at the beginning of the day, the first group who started working there agreed with them that they would get that 1 denarius for their entire workday. Right? So all the groups come, they're coming to get their wages, and the group who worked 1 hour, the landowner gives them their 1 denarius. So here's the group who works all day. They come to the landowner and they're kind of like sitting there waiting for their wages to come. The landowner gives them the 1 denarius. And the group says, wait, well, that doesn't make sense because that group over there worked 1 hour and they got 1 denarius. Now you're giving us 1 denarius. And the landowner says, well, isn't this what we agreed upon at the very beginning of your workday? And they're like, yeah, it is what we agreed upon, but it just doesn't really make sense if you gave that group over there who only worked 1 hour the same wage. And basically the whole parable ends with the first will be last and the last will be first. Well, I think the first question that comes to many people's mind when it comes to this parable is that doesn't seem fair. And I think a lot of times in our life, we look around at people and what they're doing or maybe what God has called them to do. And we kind of come to this, well, that doesn't seem fair. Why is this person over there who's living a crummy life seem to have blessing upon blessing upon blessing financially in their work life when I'm over here striving and working my hardest and volunteering at the church, and it seems like I just keep having problem upon problem upon problem. And what we do is we start looking around and we start comparing ourselves to what other people have going on in their lives. However, when we do that, we don't really know the full story of what's going on in people's lives. It reminds me of the quote that says, comparison is the thief of joy. Because if you're constantly comparing yourself to other people, you're constantly going to be unhappy about what God is doing in your life. I remember this situation back a long time ago when I was in a close relationship with someone, and I didn't know their financial situation whatsoever, honestly. But from what I thought, well, like, wow, they're really like slamming it at work because they seem to have everything that they have need of, naturally speaking. And I just remember just having this thought, and it wasn't like I was like crazily thinking about the situation, but I just remember having the thought like, wow, they must be doing really well for themselves. And then later I come to find out that they were like total in financial distress, and they had credit card bill upon credit card bill upon credit card bill, and they're losing this over here and losing this, and their whole life financially was in shambles. But again, for me, I had thought like, wow, they're financially set up. But in that moment, I was reminded, wow, things are really never as they appear. You never know what people have going on in your life. You could meet someone who's smiling all day long and they seem like, wow, they're just like they're living the life, but yet you don't know what's really going on in their heart or what's really bothering them in their mind or what kind of life they're living at behind closed doors. So it's really important that we don't get to this comparison mode where we start looking around and look at these surface level things and start comparing ourselves to other people, because we're really going to find ourselves in this place where we're losing our joy. We have to be focused on what God has called us to do and do a good job doing what God has called us to do, so we don't end up losing our joy in comparison to other people. There's a scripture that I'm reminded of in the Bible that's so crispy clear when Peter says to Jesus in a situation about John, and he's asking about John, and Jesus looks at him and he's like, what is it to you? I think what we need to do is we need to hone ourselves back in and say, okay, what is it that God has called me to do? And now I need to focus on that. It doesn't matter other people's blessings. It doesn't matter other people's financial situations. It doesn't matter what anyone else is doing, but what has God called me to do? Because when you flip back to the parable in Matthew 20 about the vineyard, you're going to realize at some point or another in your life, you're probably going to be the person who only worked 1 hour's wage. And what you need to do is, instead of focusing on the injustice. Say, wow, I serve such a merciful and gracious God. And at some point or another in your life, you're going to be the person who worked all day long. And at some point, you're going to be the person who only worked an hour. But instead of focusing on what other people have and what other people are doing and what God gave them, focus on the amazing blessing that God has for your life and be so thankful that you serve an amazing, merciful, and gracious God. Because that's the kind of God that we serve. And I don't know about you, but I'm super thankful about that.